Besides the biblical motif of persecuted prophets with the ensuing punishment of destruction and exile, Second Temple Jewish thought offered other meanings too for the suffering and death of the righteous. The comparison between first and second books of Maccabees, describing Israel's successful rebellion in mid-2nd century BCE against the cruel rule of the foreign forces, provide here important evidence. First Maccabees is surviving in Greek translation, but was seemingly originally written in Hebrew and in the land of Israel, whereas Second Maccabees originated from Hellenistic diaspora. There are significant differences in their retelling of the story. In First Maccabees, desecration of the temple and persecution of those in Israel who remained faithful to the laws of their ancestors is presented as a natural expression of the Gentile rulers' sinfulness and enmity, starting already from Alexander the Great. The victory or redemption is given to Israel there by God as a fair reward for their brave military demeanor and steadfastness in defending their religious rights. Unlike this, Second Maccabees speaks of the desecration of the temple as a punishment for Israel's own sins, punishment in which the Gentile rulers are no more than handy tools in God's hands. Correspondingly, the victory and redemption are given here to Israel by God only after their sins have been atoned. What is most important for us in Second Maccabees version is that this atonement is achieved through the martyr's death of the 7 righteous brothers and their mother. This is the story in chapter 7 of the book, which you have been asked to read closely. We are talking about a situation when the atonement cannot be performed in the temple, which has been desecrated. The atoning death of the martyrs, therefore, comes as a substitute. One can discern here an important development in Jewish thought occurring in response to dire circumstances. This is how the story of martyrdom begins, and I omit some of the grisly details. Chapter 7 from 2nd Maccabees. It happened also that 7 brothers and their mother were arrested and were being compelled by the king under torture to partake of unlawful swine's flesh. One of them, acting as their spokesman, said, "We are ready to die rather than transgress the laws of our fathers." The king fell into a rage and gave orders that pans and cauldrons be heated. These were heated immediately, and he commanded that the tongue of the spokesman be cut out, and that they scalp him and cut off his hands and feet. When he was utterly helpless, the king ordered them to take him to the fire, still breathing, and to fry him in a pan. But the brothers and their mother encouraged one another to die nobly, saying, "The Lord God is watching over us, and in truth has compassion on us, as Moses declared. And he will have compassion on his servants." After the first brother had died in this way, they brought forward the second for their sport. They asked him, "Will you eat rather than have your body punished limb by limb?" He replied in the language of his fathers and said to them, "No." Therefore he in turn underwent tortures as the first brother had done. And when he was at his last breath, he said, "You accursed wretch, you dismiss us from this present life, but the King of the universe will raise us up to an everlasting renewal of life, because we have died for his laws." Already here we encounter the claim, which is emphatically repeated in the narrative time and again, that the righteous martyrs will be rewarded, seemingly at the end of times, by resurrection. Thus, for example, when under torture the 4th son said to the king, it's verse 14, "One cannot but choose to die at the hands of men, and to cherish the hope that God gives of being raised again by him. But for you there will be no resurrection to life." After the sixth son reiterates the overall perception of the book that they suffer because of Israel's own sins against God, the text highlights the especially admirable conduct of the brother's mother, who is told about, starting from verse 20, though she saw her 7 sons perish within a single day, she bore it with good courage because of her hope in the Lord. She encouraged each of them in the language of their fathers. Filled with a noble spirit, she fired her woman's reasoning with a man's courage and said to them, the Creator of the world, who shaped the beginning of man and devised the origin of all things, will in his mercy give life and breath back to you again, since you now forget yourselves for the sake of his laws. In addition to emphasizing the future resurrection, the mother also evokes the theme of God's covenant, temporarily broken because of Israel's sins, but to be renewed. And I quote, and if our living Lord is angry for a little while to rebuke and discipline us, he will again be reconciled with his own servants. For our brothers, after enduring a brief suffering, have drunk of ever-flowing life under God's covenant. It is the last brother that before his own death spells out the aim and meaning of their family's martyrdom, starting from verse 37. I, like my brothers, give up my body and life for the laws of our fathers, appealing to God to show mercy soon to our nation, and through me and my brothers to bring to an end the wrath of the Almighty, which has justly fallen on our whole nation. And the next chapter tells us that following the martyrdom, God did forgive Israel its sins and gave them victory over the empire's enemies. 2 Maccabees chapter 8. They besought the Lord to look upon the people who were oppressed, and to hearken to their blood that cried out to him, and to remember also the lawless destruction of the innocent babies and the blasphemies committed against his name, and to show his hatred of evil. As soon as Maccabeus got his army organized, the Gentiles could not withstand him, for the wrath of the Lord had turned to mercy. This is a particular pattern of thought, first attested in the Second Temple period. Martyrdom of the righteous few is perceived here as bringing about the forgiveness of people's transgressions and the redemption of Israel as a whole, with an adjacent motive of resurrection. We will now check how this pattern functions in the gospel narrative.